Welcome to Blue Chip Academy, the Blueprint to Success interview series, providing unique blueprints, tactical knowledge, and best practices to navigate the critical points in the football ecosystem so athletes and parents can prepare a plan to a career path that any athlete can bank on. Today, we have a special guest, Marlene Sanders, mother of Pro Bowl running back, NFL running back, Miles Sanders. Marlene comes going through the process as a parent, going through seeing from multiple critical points from an elite athlete at high school, it's a Penn State, transitioning to the NFL, and going through different transitions through the way. Marlene is a residential property manager that works for the Allegheny County Housing Authority for 21 years, helping others with affordable housing. And you can find her on Instagram at Mar Sanders. So we'd like to welcome Marlene Sanders.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming to the Blue Chip Academy and somebody that's had like a legitimate blue chip prospect coming through the process. You kind of seen it multiple times with a legitimate blue chip and then with your other son. So you talk to me a little bit just going into the process, and we just think about the business, and you were giving advice to someone else coming in. What would be one piece of advice that you would lend to someone that they can have the bank on success through their whole football career?
The word that sticks out would be support. Our kids need support when it comes to just in life in general. So I would say just to support them. You know, when your child tells you they like doing something, just support them because you never know where it might lead. And that's basically what happened with Miles.
Absolutely. That's big that you say like the support, right? Because like when the kid kind of makes that decision, you kind of see them take an interest, like leaning into that passion, helping them curate and kind of fill those gaps. I talked about it before for like middle school age parents that if they're getting to the process, there's an aspect where they have to understand that there's a sacrifice that comes along and, you know, leaning into the kid. So that's a great answer. And so like getting into the recruiting process, and we just talk about like that first aspect, you've been through it twice,
Yes.
correct? How was your experience through the recruiting process?
It has mixed emotions. It was exciting at the same time, but it was also, you know, just a little bit of stress. You know, as a single mom, I was basically doing everything, running back and forth up and down the highway. Basically, in the beginning, it was just fun to play football. Right. And then, you know, you find out that your child name become a household item. You know what I mean? People, Miles need to play on Friday at Woody High, and it's, you know, number 4, the running back. So basically it got to be like, oh my God. So I was just sitting in the stand, like just listening. Nobody knew who I was because I wasn't that type of a mom, you know, but it was always good things. And I'm like, you know, this sounds like it's really serious. So basically, you know, I just had to, you know, just deal with it.
Most
as
definitely.
The process go. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you say you started off excited, right? You get the opportunity, and like when you say you're excited, was it once Miles started having success, or once maybe the first offer came? Like when did you start getting excited about the like?
I think I started getting excited when just like it started out basically, you know, he's gonna play high school football from Little League, and the next thing you know, something happened and he ended up being the starter for the high school team, varsity team. He's a little kid. That's not what he was banking on. You know, we were banking on going to the 9th grade every Saturday morning. And then, you know, something happened and they're like, no, Miles is going to be the starter every Friday. So
Miles started as a freshman, right?
Yes.
Going in. So we talk about guys that, you know, there's elite guys that play as a freshman. So here's an example of somebody, you know, mom that's coming from 8th grade, right in the 9th grades with the big boys.
Right, with the big boys. So basically, yeah, it was just, you know, like it felt like pressure at one time because, you know, you want to win, you know, and it's like, okay, Miles is gonna, you know, play basically the whole game. You're expecting your child to be in and out, and he's in the game the whole time. So, you know, it's like, oh my God, this is a lot.
So it got serious to you once you realized like, oh, he's playing varsity football as a freshman. Yeah. Like that's when it was serious.
This 9th grader is playing, you know, varsity. I had, you know, mapped out my schedule. I'm going to be at football every Saturday morning, but instead,
JV.
Yeah, I was running from work, you know, just to get into, you know, football practice on time.
Yeah.
So
That's an interesting way of finding out that it's serious. Cause like for a kid, most kids that end up playing in ninth grade, there's typically like a process that's kind of implemented, by the parents or just whatever support group or whatever the case may be that are getting them ready to be able to play at ninth grade. So that kind of speaks to just how, like, whether he was physically prepared and just mentally prepared to step on the field at a school like Woodland Hills, for that
Right.
matter, in ninth grade. And that's kind
Yeah.
of when you're like, oh, it's
This is
serious, right?
this is serious.
It's a serious business.
This is
It,
serious. Yeah. And
when did
everybody wanted to know, is he coming to practice? Is he coming? Yeah.
So you mentioned that once you got the information, or you were excited at first, and then you kind of got a little stressed out. When you started getting stressed out, how informed did you feel going through the process?
I think because we didn't take it that serious, so I didn't have the information. I didn't realize how him being couldn't miss a day, couldn't miss a practice, couldn't miss a game. So basically it became stressful. Like I really don't know where to turn. I didn't have anyone to talk to, just like, how serious is high school football? I just thought it was just high school football.
Right.
You need to win on Friday and keep it moving. So,
Uh-huh.
it became like really stressful. So then that's when you start to, think about to reach out to other people just to find out
Yeah.
how serious this is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a key point. I mean, because like when you're talking about that, and it's just like trying to figure it out. Like, did you start taking miles to specialized training before that? Like, was there like a lot of training, or was it just football? Or was
So
it
no, so being in Pittsburgh, if you know anything, they had things 7-on-7. I didn't know what 7-on-7 was,
okay?
and Miles really didn't participate in a lot of 7-on-7 because as a starter, your coach don't want you out there getting hurt, and I was never the mom to sneak him there, so I was like, no, he might have played one or two, but when they started talking about he has to travel, I'm like, no. I wasn't that trustworthy. So then, his little league coach, Coach Craig Williams,
Okay.
we kept in touch with him. So he basically kind of told us about, DeWayne Brown. And DeWayne Brown is known in Pittsburgh for, his skill training. So I started to take him to Carrick.
Okay.
And I lived on, the east side, driving to Carrick every night.
Mhm.
And, just sitting there watching him practice and just getting better and better. It just
Just to give
basically
context of what you're saying, you're going to work all day, and then you got get through with it, and you're
get
going from
to,
the east side
yeah,
of Pittsburgh, going through the
into
tunnels,
the
like Pittsburgh
exactly.
traffic,
Yeah, it was
to
it was it was a lot. It was a
absolutely.
lot.
So, like, for parents listening, understanding when you're making this commitment, and once Marlene realized that her
He's
son was fulfilling his passion, and he was had an opportunity to be successful in it, there was a sacrifice or an investment by her, and what had to happen where she had to
yeah.
make those personal sacrifices to make sure those dots
Yeah.
were being connected.
I
So
gave up. Yeah, I basically gave up hanging out after work, happy hour. I don't know what that is because I never.
that's I mean, that kudos to that, because that's what parents, I mean, need to hear, in the sense of understanding what it takes to be there. So it's a team
It's a
effort.
sacrifice.
The
Yes.
sacrifice. I mean, a sacrifice and an investment, right? Because
Right.
and there's joy coming in. He's doing something that he wants to do, and I mean, as a parent, I understood it when I was coming up. Like, I know my parents were driving around, I'm doing all this stuff, the track
Right.
stuff in the summer. So kudos to you, and great.
Right.
Like, man, I love hearing stories like that when, to put it, think first, right? You put it like
Right.
meals first and everything that comes
Exactly.
behind that. So when we were going through that, when did you start going to camps? You mentioned that you didn't want to travel too much, with the
Right.
7-on-7 camps, but did you take miles to like college camps, like for the
Well,
recruiting process
it
starting?
started out with, when Coach Williams, Craig Williams gave us the information. I started just Googling a couple things, and seeing, he would tell us about Nike camps, and then Nike would lead to Under Armour camps. So basically I started driving. I think the first camp was in Pittsburgh, like at Montour High School. So we went there, and that was my first camp. So, and I didn't know how serious it was either. Miles didn't took it serious the first time because this was his first opportunity. He just
Right.
thought I'm playing football. So we didn't do well the first time, and then we started to just study what was going on, and then it went from Montour to Ohio to, I drove 13 hours to Jacksonville.
Oh,
to an
wow.
Under Armour camp. He won MVP. It just, so it started to become like a routine. So
So on the
night,
camp that you drove, so the camp that you invested the 13-hour drive in, he ended up becoming the
the
MVP.
MVP,
And this
correct.
was a national Under Armour
Yeah, it
camp.
was an Under Armour national camp. So you go to the small ones, and then you just kept getting, they kept bringing you back. And then, Nike Elite Camp at, Orlando. And it just became like, okay, this is my life now.
We can touch on what you said. The first camp that he went to when he wasn't prepared, and you felt like he didn't perform to his level. How did he respond after that? Like, was
So,
he
ba-
down?
so basically, so how those camp work, so it was pouring down rain. And I guess kids from everywhere just came to the camp, and they do like the little skill training, and Miles would do it. But I think they were looking for players that are motivated. So you're supposed to get to the front of the line, try to keep getting to the front of the line. Miles was at the back of the line
Okay.
the whole camp, like, you know what I mean? Like, he did what he needed to do, but he didn't understand the seriousness of the camp. So we left there like, okay, we're going to try this again. And we went to Ohio. And I think he realized that it was a competition. And before you know it, he started becoming MVP here, MVP there. So then we realized, like, okay, this is our life. We're, it's camp
Gotcha.
all summer.
Yep.
And
So they clicked for him. He was like, "Oh, this is
yes,
competitive." He started jumping. No one told him
yes,
that's that. Okay, so again, that's something
yes,
that Miles kind of just had in him, and kind of came
yeah.
out when he
He
saw the
likes to
opportunity.
compete.
Right. So when you were going through the process, and you just now once the visits, now he's a top guy, and he's
Mhm.
at his offers, and you're going to go check out schools. Were you telling him what to pay attention to throughout the recruiting process, or were you kind of wide-eyed open, going through it as well?
Right, right. So in the beginning, I was wide open, but when you sit down, when you're there and you're waiting through the process, I just started, just I had nothing to do but to wait 2, 3, 4 hours. So I started Googling and, just trying to, see what do you need to do to become an effective player. And then
Right.
little things are started to pop in that, you could be the greatest athlete you want. You can
Mhm.
have 1 star to 5 star. If you don't have the grades, it doesn't mean a thing.
Right.
And I think a lot of parents just basically kind of skip that part. Your kid is talented, so okay, he's gonna go somewhere. But so basically I had to, just starting to write down what needs to be done. He needs his SAT, he needs to sign up for NCA, all that stuff. And I just started taking care, and we just kind of made a pact, like, if you just continue to keep your grades up, because you needed a certain grade point average, to get to certain level of school. What school do you want to? Do you want to go to D1, D2? There were grade levels that you had to have.
Yeah.
And, so it was like, okay, so, I took a lot of notes. I learned it basically. Google is a really good and it's
Absolutely.
free.
Yeah. And that's a great point that you're touching on, because like it seems like everything that you were kind of gathering the information was kind of connecting the dots. Like, what can we do? Let's
Right.
not mess up this opportunity. He's going to be a qualifier. He's going to get into school. He's going to make sure, all the things, all the T's are crossed and the I's are
Right.
dotted. Were you thinking about post football career when you're looking at these different schools? Were you thinking about majors or kind of what the different schools had to offer, Miles? Like, what were you going into your search? Like, what was going into your search
So,
of the schools?
like, yeah, like with my, just searching around, I started to learn that there were different levels, like, the D1, D2, D3, D4. In the beginning, I thought you just go to college. I didn't know there were levels of, so I started to look into basically like what he needed for a D1 or a D2. Basically, just gathering just all the information, and like you said, connecting the dots, you know what I mean, just, and letting Miles know, like, in order for you to get to where you need to be, this is what we need to do. And it was like a connection, you know what I mean. He wanted it. School started, I think from basically his MVPs. One camp would tell what he did, and before you know it, another camp, and before you know it, it's like, Miles is going to play in the All-Star. It just kind of all kind of came in. But basically, I just basically got the information on my own. And I think school needs a lot of those information, because I think kids just basically think that you're a good player.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah. And it's funny you're touching on it, because like what you're coming into or talking about is like Miles is finding out these things, and you're preparing his blueprint of like what he kind of needs to prepare, what he needs to do. He happened to be the best running back in the country, so there was a little outlier thing with him. But like you're talking about how he was like dominating at camps, right, and like doing that whole thing. I just want to let the listeners know that his film was elite as well. Like he was doing the thing at camp, and the film on the field was stupendous. So when you're thinking about those different things, did Miles ever talk about, like, when he's looking at the different schools, what do you want to do post football career? Or were you telling him to like look at what to do post football career?
Yeah, like I think in the beginning it was just to get a football scholarship. So, most parents, you don't want to pay for college. That stuff is so expensive. But I think we kind of saw a little bit further. It wasn't anything that we were like really emphasizing on, like, oh, you're going to go to the NFL. I mean, that's what he wanted to do, but it was more, let's go get this college degree first. You know what I mean? And then, like you said, they started, oh, Miles is this, he's a 5-star, he's a 4-star, he's it's like, well, where's all this coming from? And then, you started to see your child picture in the newspaper every Saturday morning. I think I bought every paper, and it's like, oh, this is really a big deal, as you're going. And I'm like, okay. And, we talked about it, and you say, yeah, Mom, I want to go to the NFL one day.
Do you remember how old he was when he said that, or what year he was?
I think he got like basically serious in 11th grade.
11th grade.
Like I think our first Miles was invited to I want to say it was a junior camp his sophomore year, and it was with Terry Smith, so he went up there, and it turned out to be a not so good thing when we came back home, because everybody was, well, he's not a soft, he's a soft, what is he doing at a junior camp? How comes we weren't? But right. So
how did he get invited and not us?
He get invited. Yeah. I'm a junior, and you know what I mean? So I think it was like, well, wow, people are really interested in you. So I think he started to, this is what I want to do.
You're touching on some important points, even when you're like noticing the other people's, like his peers, or whether it's other parents talking about like, oh, what's going on here, and just like the magnitude of what kind of comes along with that elite football path and going to college and being able to maintain Miles's expectation, his mentality, whether it's the whispers that he's hearing or like jealousy, and just the maturation process in that. I think that's really, we're going to talk about some little bit later on, but I'm very interested to hear on some of those topics. So what was the best part of the recruiting process for you?
I think the best part was, I want to say, all the mails that was coming in the house. It was, I had to go out and get a bigger mailbox.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And because the mailman was just like, what's going on? I think the worst set of mail, it was good, but Penn State sent him 107 pieces of mail. Okay. Just imagine.
Right. It all comes through.
So yeah, and I think it was exciting just to see his name, because the packets would come in the mail and it would just be big and bold, Marlene Sanders. I think it was like, wow, that's my son. You know what I mean? Like his name is literally on these big items, and just hearing people talk about him, it was good.
Right. In a positive way, of course.
Yes.
Like that's, so what was the worst part?
I think the worst part, it's not bad as in worse. I think it's just more like there were so many phone calls.
Gotcha.
It was 6 a.m. in the morning. It was anytime. It was just, it has its good and its bad, but he was being pulled out of class. You know what I mean? So I had to get like really strict, like, do not do not let them out of class. Because, kids are excited. They don't
Right.
care. But, and then, just keeping them focused, because when you have, he had 24 offers. So when you have mail just coming in, all these mail, it was just like, we started just getting boxes. Like, I'm not opening all this. This is just, he's excited. So the work, his mind is not on school. So somebody has to keep his mind on school, because at the end of the day, none of this is worth anything if you don't have the grade. So I had to become the sergeant, the mom and the sergeant at the same time. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Like, put teachers on email, group email. Is Miles in class? Let me know. So I'm at work trying to sneak up, just let me know if they put, it was so much for one person.
So the worst part ends up being like the shift almost in the dynamic of relationship between mom and son, to
You gotta
like
be
almost like a
mad.
momager, operations manager.
That's
Yeah.
basically my name.
Okay, the momager. Yeah. So it kind of transitions as a teenager, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like kind of, and it's something that's very valuable, because you're entering. I mean, now it's like, it sounds like you're going through it. You were in the moment and you were taking it all in, but you were a part of the business. Like, you were in the football business at that time, and you were doing your due diligence by making sure everything was, clear, by doing your research and that's amazing to hear. So what would be the key takeaway that you would share with another parent, like if they were going through the recruiting process?
I would just basically say, just, it's going to be tiring, but just, support the child, listen to them, make sure you stay on top of all the important stuff, because there are kids that we know that missed the mark, didn't take the SAT, didn't take, what I mean, forgot about all that stuff because your child plays so well. You forget that there are steps in getting to where he needs to. Homework, grades is the biggest part. Mm-hmm. Of course, he has to be, if they're looking at your son, then he's doing good. So that part is out the door. But don't forget the important part that's going to lead him to, to where he needs to be, or else it doesn't matter. You're just going to be wasting your time,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this episode of the Blueprints of Success podcast is brought to you by LIG Sports Group, a football operations strategy and consulting group. And today we will be talking about the Hit the Ground Running program, which is a 8-week player development program for college players transitioning to the NFL so they can hit the ground running. We touch on everything that they need to know for the first 365 days of their pro career, so that they're ready to create a career that they can bank on. So getting back into it, we talk about, the recruiting process and how you kind of recognize that it was a serious deal, right? You were like, okay, it's a serious, he's playing 9th grade football at varsity, he's got these offers going on. So now we're transitioning to the next kind of critical point, which is leaving Penn State and into the NFL. How would you compare the recruiting process and the agency selection process?
I think they have similarities, but on a different level. Like, recruiting, for high school to college, yeah, you meet a lot of people. They're going to tell you the same thing that you want to hear. This is the school to play at. We want you here. So the agency is kind of sort of the same. They tell you this is the agency. We represent this. We represent that person. But at the end of the day, you have to feel comfortable with an agent or an agency, because they're the ones that's going to be negotiating your contract. You know what I mean? So basically, you want to do your homework. And once again, there are so many things out there that you can read upon, stories on past, football players, just giving you their story. So basically, you just want to make sure you feel comfortable with that person. You can trust that person. I mean, trust is a long word, but just basically, you feel a kind of like a comfortable level. They're not shutting you out. Just want to deal with just your child as a parent, because, I've been there with Miles for the whole thing. But I think the most important thing, you got to be certain, because once you make that decision, then and you sign that I'm gonna, you know, use you as my agent, you give up your eligibility to play football right now. That's it. You're done. You're entering the
Right.
NFL process, you know. So basically, yeah, you gotta be very certain that this is an agency.
And that's so big that you say that, because when we talk about the recruiting process, what I tell guys all the time is it's a mutual relationship building thing, right? The
Right.
prospect has to get to know the coaches get to know you for 3 to 4 years. The
Right.
agency process, it's kind of
Right.
fast, right?
It's
Depending
quick.
on who you're dealing with, if there's not like a background history to somebody that's kind of connected to
Right.
what you're dealing with, you might meet an agent 3, 4 months before you're making that next critical transition. So that's an important piece that you said, where it's a matter of having trust,
Yeah.
when you're going through it. Did you have a feeling of who you were going to go with when you went into the process?
No, at the time, I mean, everybody was calling. They have certain times that they can reach out to your kids, but basically, you know, they're still gonna, you know, do the little sneak tip, like, you know, talk to you, hey, you know, give you their cards and stuff like that. But, you know, you just have to educate your child and tell him, like, you know, don't make any decision without talking it over with your family, because in this business and oral, you know, you can say something and you can be jammed up. So, and those are the things that you have to read and know about. Like, don't let your child, you know, agree to anything. Make sure you have someone, you know, all the colleges have, you know, departments where you can talk to, you know, read over your, you know, contracts, that type of stuff. You know, Penn State had one, you know, we sent it in, he read it, and don't commit to anything, because at the end of the day, they're looking to work for you. You're not looking to work for them. That's the difference
That's the
between
difference.
NFL. You are
Sometimes
the
people lose track of
employer.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's important. I mean, because it's a different time. You're coming into the NFL. There's just different. It's a different pitch, and what I'm picking up from just this whole interview is you kind of did your homework. Every
Yeah.
situation that came up, you did your own
Yeah. I was
objective
always
research. Don't get too blown out of proportion. So
yeah.
you mentioned trust being a big piece of the operation. Was there anything that was like, all right, it's the trustworthy thing? They represent these players. I know
Right.
something. Like, what are those? If someone's like kind of going through that process.
So that, you know, basically you want to look for someone or an agency that doesn't have 100 players, because you have to remember, you know, your son, you know, is coming in, and is he going to be number 101, or, you know what I mean? So you don't want, you know, big agencies are good, but they're not always the best. So you want, like I said, it's that trust, and it's that, you know, feeling comfortable, like they're including you in things that, you know, they're not just going to the player and say, okay, this is, you know, I demanded that comfortability, and Miles made that plain and straight. Like, you need to talk to my mom before, you know.
Yeah.
I Even though he might like it, he's like, you need to talk to my mom, you
But you
know.
guys are on the same page, so that's like
Right.
important, right?
Right.
Like, as long as you guys are on the same page, it seems that anything can kind of
Yes.
work out, even if you're on the wrong decision. If you're on the right
Yeah.
page, it's still right. So like
It's still right.
that's an important piece. I think what you're saying is just like that proper lines of communication, and
Right.
you're vetting people at the end of the day. Like you said, I like the point that you made, where not having a huge agency, or it's not bad for guys. Like, there's nothing wrong with a big agency, but when you're being taken care of, or how are you getting service for what you're paying for at the end of the day?
Exactly.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
We'll keep it simple.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the transition a little bit from like college and the NFL. You saw the transition from Miles going from Woodland Hills to Penn State. Talk to me a little bit about that transition from Penn State to the NFL. Like, maybe compare his freshman year at Penn State to his rookie year in the NFL.
So, you know, so the from transitioning from high school to college, um, you know, that part, you know, it's stressful in itself, but remember, you know, you're making a decision, like, okay, I'm going with this school, okay. Whereas the difference with the NFL is they're choosing you. Whereas, you know, you don't have yeah, you might say I want to play for the Miami Dolphin, but that doesn't mean who's going to draft you.
Right.
But whereas with, you know, Penn State, all the other school, Pitt, Clemson, all that stuff. So you're making that decision like, okay, you're thinking about distance, you know, is the family going to be able to go? You think about the platform that you're going to play for, you know, it's like a lot. It was easier. It was real hard because, you know, Miles had different, you know, where he wanted to go. And, you know, when you narrow it down, he thought about it like, you know, is mom going to be able to come, you know, to all your games? Because I've never missed a game, you know, and financial plays a part in it too. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? So then, you know, you're going to the NFL, you know, that's something where, like I said, you don't have a choice. It's who's going to draft you. It was a difficult decision because I'm sure people know he came out his junior year. There was a little bit of frustration there because, you know, you're drafted as, you know, the number one running back, you know, in the country. And then you go and you find out that there's another elite player, you know, at the time when, you know, he made his decision his sophomore, I think his junior year. He kind of made his decision early because he was being drafted early. So you go in and you find out like, okay, I have to sit behind someone. I don't think at the time when you went in, he knew that,
Right.
but that's what happened. So you go in but one thing I always try to teach him, like, you know, Miles, there's going to be, everybody is brand new when you get back on that field.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's 4 or 5, there's going to be 10 5-stars. You know what I mean? And that's the point you have to teach a child. Like, you might be a 5-star, whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
You know, that's a title that I didn't come up with it. You know, because you were good at, you know, what you do. But just remember, there's going to be another 5, you know, there's more 5-stars. There's more 4-stars, more, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So basically, you know, I always kept that in his mind. Like, you're basically starting over. But then the recruiting process kind of confused you a little bit because, you know, some school come at you and tell you like, you're the man.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be the man.
Yep.
You know, but then I also told him, you have to also think about, and this goes on in the NFL, you're a freshman. Do you think a junior or a sophomore is going to allow just to walk in and take their spot?
Here's my spot.
Yeah, he's, you know, it's not fair because that's not what you're told in the recruiting process, but it happens. You know what I mean? It's like me working here 21 years and they bring someone in off the street and give them, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I had to teach him that, like, this is just life, but they're young men. You hype them up. Oh, you're a 5-star. You're this, you're going to, you know, you come in ready to go. And then you had to become humble.
Absolutely.
And, you know,
You answered one of my questions that I was going to ask in like the next section, which was, you know, he comes into Penn State as the number 1 running back and like Saquon's there. And you talk
right.
about like, how did he, you know, maneuver that? Cause like now you see the athletes in, you know, I can't say today's time, but like the transfer portal, if that situation happens, just to profile faceless people, you know,
Right.
someone like Miles would transfer. But like you talked about it earlier when he was at the camp circuit, like the level of, okay, we're competing. I'm turning it on. I'm doing this. And you're telling him like, okay, whatever the 4 or 5-star thing means, don't have your value in that. You have to be ready to compete. That's life. So that's just some strong information. And I was going to ask, like, how did you balance that for him when he was coming up? Because I know how hard that is. Like I was in the building when he was like going through it. I'm like, I was very good, man. Like, you know, like, you know, Saquon was great as well. And just as a parent, like what support do you have? Because sometimes I know, I mean, when I ever had bad days in football, like I would just kind of snap on people. Like, how did you handle that? But it seemed like you prepped him for these moments of adversity that kind of came up, especially in the competitive realm.
Right. So, you know, so I have never missed a game since he was 7. So basically I never missed a college game. And, you know, I kind of sat in the same seat every single game. That's a whole different story. But I wanted to make sure he could see me when he turned around. Okay. And I could see the frustration on his face. I could see the shoulders dropping. I was recruited for this. I made sure I was at the tunnel every single Saturday at the end of a game to make sure I let him know that, I get it. He wavered. There were times when he's like, why am I even here?
Right.
They're burning my freshman year. I should have just been redshirt. The whole thing that kids go through. He's human. Mm-hmm. But I had to remind him, like, you don't run from your problems. You have to face it. I said, you're here for a reason. It's 107,000 people chanting your name. Okay. I get it. No, we didn't expect him to be sitting behind Saquon. There were times when he only got in the game 5 minutes before the fourth quarter. That was his freshman year. Mm-hmm. Any kid is going to be mad. But, I always told him that I'm going to be here whether you get in 4 seconds, 4 minutes, 40 minutes. Your time is coming. You just have to be patient. And it's hard for young men. It's hard for human beings just to be patient.
But I gotta give you so much credit because you're giving him that type of reinforcement behind the scenes, right? Because that's right. I don't think that's not always consistent behind the door. It's like,
no. I've heard parents like, no, you need to go. Let's go. No, what are you running for? Whether you go to Alabama or Pitt or anything, there's gonna be something different. You know what I mean?
Can't be scared to compete. Can't be scared to compete. So I can see where Miles gets it. So I see Marlene is the holder of that energy, man.
You know what I mean? It's awesome. Like you have to. You can't just agree with the kid, even though you want to, but you have to let him. You know what I mean? Like, son, I don't know why it's happening, and he's going through it right now in the NFL, as you can see.
Right.
Run the ball. Come on. Mm-hmm. And I have to. Wait out, Miles. Yep. Hey, you can only control what you can control. Play the game. Do what you need to do. Your time is coming. And he got his junior year. He got his start. Mm-hmm. He did his thing. And this is what, you know what I mean? It's like you have to support them. You can't always agree with them on everything because they're still young. They're young people. They don't know what life is going to eat you up. It don't matter if you're in the NFL or whatever. It's just what it is.
Oh, that's so true. You drew the parallel to something that happened in college, right? He dealt with different, adversities, sitting behind Saquon and whatever the case may be against the NFL, maybe some injuries, not running the ball, all those different things. Let's talk about like that transition and compare it, from high school to college and college to the NFL. Anything you said when you were in high school going through, you kind of became the operations manager, right? Like, oh, Miles, go to class, do this. Did anything change in that operation relationship when you got to NFL? Like, how was that different between you guys?
So, I mean, I'm called momager, whatever they call. And yeah, we have intense conversation.
It just got a little bit more intense as the,
okay. Because, in his eyes, I'm a grown man, Mom. Mm-hmm. I make my own money, more money than your average, 20-something-year-old. So yeah, there are times when I'm like, dude, do you really need that, around it,
Gotcha.
Guns and butter, babe. Let's do it.
That's it.
And he'll listen. He'll be mad. He ghosts me sometimes, but at the end of the day, I'll get the, a week later, you're right, Mom. All right. There's a difference between needs and want. Mm-hmm. And I think, the biggest misfit of it's not just going to the NFL, just our kids. And I think it's African Americans. We're not taught financial literacy. Mm. So, you take a 22-year-old and you give them all that money.
Right. For something they've been doing for free for the past, 15
right.
years.
So it's like
it's an extracurricular. Now it's a business.
It's like I think that needs to be implemented in somewhere in between there because a lot of them really don't understand it. But no, we get our intense moment, and then I become Marlene. And then it's back to Mom. I love you. You know what I mean? So you're gonna have those moments, and you're just trying to protect them, basically. And sometimes you got to protect them from themselves.
And you hit on a real point when you just talked about like the financial literacy being taught. I think it's a whole mindset, right? Like looking at it when you're going in that 9th, 10th grade time frame, looking at you're going into a business and
Mhm.
preparing these 13, 14-year-olds like you're going to a business when you get
Your
some money,
business. Yeah.
you are in business. The same thing, financial literacy is a key part of business. So like that whole aspect, how you market yourself, your branding actually matters. How you present yourself in the building,
Mhm.
how you deal with adversity, right? Because like I was always impressed, in the day and age where guys were and like how Miles conducted himself, sitting
Mhm.
behind Saquon. You couldn't tell. You could tell,
Right.
that something was wrong. He wanted to play because any
Right.
competitor wants to play.
Right.
And
Mhm.
and just that whole just that maturation process is just sped up. And you see sometimes when steps are skipped, right? So
Right.
when that maturation process sped up for Miles, how did you talked about it a little bit, maybe some purchases where you're like, yo, don't do that. And like, I'm a grown man.
Right.
How did the maturation process, like when it sped up, did it change your relationship at all?
No, it didn't change because, Miles and I have like a good bond. Mom, I've been there all the time. He knows what I'm saying is for his benefit. I'm not the type of mom. I'm not out here trying to get a big house for my son or anything like that. He knows it's all about his well being and making sure that, at the end of the day, when football is done, especially with the position that he plays, you want to be able to enjoy life and not go broke,
Right.
basically.
Right.
So, we have those type of conversation. We talk about investment, we talk about, putting money away, that type of stuff. I think a lot of guys, they see their potential and, I'm going to get this big contract, so they start thinking ahead.
Mhm.
But us adults, we kind of understand that anything can happen in the middle. So basically, I mean, we have the intents, like, let's do something different. Let's buy this year. Let's not buy this. Let's put your money away. Let's invest. Let's,
And
do
that's not
something.
typically a conversation that
Yeah.
a
You
23, 24-year-old,
yeah.
man has with his
Right.
mom. They're typically trying
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
figure
Not
their
the
way
one they
out.
want to have, but I don't really care. I
I
tell
mean,
them.
regardless, it's the situation that it is.
Right.
So it's just like that people are kind of sprung into. And it's like you're
Mhm.
handling it and being like the rock in that. So I mean, I love hearing those situations because and we just talk about, like just the percentages, right? We say everyone thinks they're going to even get to that second contract or make the big
Mhm.
money. You think of, out of all the players that played in the NFL, only 25% made it 5 years.
Right.
We talk about like that second contract kind of falls in that 4 to 6
Mhm.
year time frame. You're only talking 25% of the 1% that makes it to the NFL even gets there. So that means
Right.
like they're building the league is built off of 74% of guys that are jumping in, jumping out.
Right.
Like to your point is injuries happen, skill
And
set goes, anything happens. So just
yeah.
having that conversation and
And,
having
and
somebody to
I
bounce
think
off.
don't forget the main one that happens is IRS.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He takes half off the back
Immediately. Immediately.
immediately. He does nothing, but he takes it right off.
Yeah. So looking back at the process, getting into the NFL, what advice would you give like a parent going through the agency selection process?
Just do your homework. Basically, it's Google. You can basically Google anything. Just Google basically what are the steps that needs to be taken to get to the process. It is a process. It's not, you don't just get in there. There are things that you have to do. You know, that support the kid. Be
Right.
there. Just making sure that he's not picking the wrong, signing any documents that he shouldn't before or after. There's a big thing in agency where, agencies will offer you loans.
Okay.
It sounds like it's money. I'll front you $25,000. It's not a gift.
Right.
It's a loan. And I think a lot of parents, depends on your situation. I'm a middle class. I don't make a lot of money. I work for the government. I'm underpaid, but I would never put my child in danger as to having anyone front me money up front.
Right.
And I understand everybody's situation is different, but I think it's a bad lesson to teach a child to take money before you even have it.
That's true.
Because when you do get your money, you're already paying out debt.
Mm-hmm.
So, from the jump, I see a lot of college kids coming out of college with Maserati and cars, and they haven't even signed their contract yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, where is all that money coming from?
Right.
But parents just have to be patient.
No.
It's gonna happen.
And that's that transition, that last critical point, just transitioning into the NFL. So when he was deciding to leave Penn State early, you touched on it a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take me through that process of making that decision? What were some of the deciding factors? Because like a lot of guys now are thinking like, should I leave? Should I go back? Transfer portal, like just take us through a little bit of that. Because somebody for like Miles, he played 1 year and was like, all right.
That was a very difficult decision. As any parent, I wanted him to finish school. You're in school, you're there, just finish it. And, he's like, Mom, just put it out. He said it from the beginning. I was only doing 3 years. He said this when he went to Penn State. I was only going to do the 3.5 years. We didn't expect him to not play like he did. But he was like, I'm going to do the 3.5 years. He didn't get to, with your grades and trying to keep it up. It kind of made it, he didn't finish it. We did all that homework. We met with coaches, just trying to see, they're encouraging him to stay. He probably would have gotten drafted in the first round if he had stayed another year. We don't know, because guess what happened? COVID happened.
That's true.
You know what I mean? And I wanted him to stay. And, he basically said he would make his decision after the bowl game. And he did. He felt like things were not going to change, because just different situation, just, the quarterback situation, that type of stuff. And he was like, I'm going to bank on myself. I just need you to support me. And, we prayed about it. We talked about it, to a couple people. And, the decision was like, okay, where he's going to go, so he banked on himself. I supported him. It doesn't happen for everyone. I'm not saying everyone should leave, right. But everybody's situation is different. But it was hard because I really wanted him to do another year.
You just wanted another
just another year, because just a full year, because he only had his junior year. Mm-hmm. But as this is a business, so
absolutely. you know it, man.
Exactly.
Good, man. That's awesome. Well, that's all I have for you today. So thank you so much for joining us today. Just to kind of recap what Marlene kind of spoke about today is just understanding, going through the process to be a support and understand where you fit in your kid's life when you're going through this. There's a level of sacrifice and investing into the process that you need to have, and you need to educate yourself, whether it's people that that are close to you, but do your own research. Like she said, Google is the thing. She drove to camps locally to national camps, and her son was the number one running back in the country. So it's not really a matter of how good or not. It's a matter of kind of that partnership and pushing things forward and seeing it through the recruiting process to the NFL. And as the maturation process comes, you have these type of situations where the mom and family members are a family asset. So that's what you always want to use in this whole football ecosystem. So just thank you again, Marlene, for joining us today. And like and subscribe this video, podcast, and download our recruiting checklist to navigate the recruiting waters so you're making right business decisions.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.